Education. I'm your host, Michael, a child and adolescent occupational therapist, and with me today is Eleanor.
I'm also a child and adolescent occupational therapist.
She is, and she's back with me again today.
Very happy to be here.
Good. I'm glad you were able to come back in. We will take some of your questions, throw in some of our own if we have some, and hopefully find the fun in learning how to support the young people in our lives. If you do have any questions you'd like to throw towards us, please send them to podcast@otfcgroup.au. That's the email address. Otherwise, on Instagram, we do get questions through there as well, which is great. That's OTFC Group on Instagram. Instagram, not ham. Sorry about that. We had a few questions that did come through. We actually had one that came through via the emails.
Yeah.
A bit of feedback about handwriting. I actually really wanted to. We just came back, for those that may know, we just came back from Sydney, a few of us. We went to a International Sense Integration Congress, which had some fantastic learning and a few things. I did want to maybe just touch base.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
Touch on that and a few things from there. But if it's okay, I wouldn't mind starting with a question that did come through the emails, which actually came through whilst we were recording a previous episode. The person was asking about a very challenging day at school, and when a child comes home and comes out of school and has a big moment, and sometimes is crying or kicking or expressing themselves with big emotions, which words can you use and how to react? So I think we mentioned in previous episodes that what you see, as you talked about, I think you said behaviour is probably better referred to as a way of communicating.
Yeah.
And I like the way that you said that. In this situation here, words that we can use or how you might react when that person is coming out of school after a big day, what might be your starting points to support that person?
I think it's important to frame this conversation too, that the person who wrote in with this question did very much feel that the young person in that moment was trying to communicate something to them. And they also made a point that it's not necessarily with some of those bigger physical responses or lashing out, as we might say, towards the parent, and maybe only last for a few seconds before then we're able to resettle from there. But I think, some of those things that we spoke about, like having that understanding that it's actually probably not about whatever has happened in that one particular moment, but that understanding that young person could have been just bottling things up as best as they could, trying to get through their day. And of course, the second they see their safe person, someone they know they can honour those authentic needs, everything just kind of unravels and spills out from there. So it's very understandable that those big feelings might not have been prevalent at school, even though that's where those trigger points potentially were across the day, but actually just having that outlet to express themselves in that moment. So I think in terms of how to react, we often talk about just keeping ourselves really settled, trying to reduce our language. I think it's really easy to go with trying to reassure and say it's okay, but actually for them in that moment, they're trying to tell you that things haven't been okay, that's not how they're feeling in themselves. So just trying to validate more, to say something along the lines of, I can see that you're feeling really frustrated. I can see that you're really upset. That must be really hard.
And sometimes space as well. I know sometimes it's hard when you're picking up from school and you want to get them in the car and transition out.
Yeah.
But space can be really useful. Sometimes getting into a person's space can instigate some of those bigger behaviours and allowing some space, or even just asking, is it okay if I give you a hug, or do you need some time, or just, I'm always big on asking those questions as well. Sometimes it's really hard for that young person to answer that. I know what we talked in a previous episode about, I think it was to do with a sort of a similar situation and what's actually going on. And I remember there was discussion around the difficulty with being able to support or co-regulate when, as an adult, you're not regulated. So you're absolutely right. If you can validate and support and try and be a regulated person in that situation, then what you have is maybe a dysregulated child, understandably, from a lot that's happened, but a regulated adult that can provide that safe space. Because if you're both dysregulated, then obviously that will increase. And
I think,
things.
Even with that understanding of they're trying to communicate to me that it's been a bad day, I think it's really easy to go into that problem-solving mode of tell me what's wrong, what's happened, how can I help? But actually all they might need from you in that moment is to say, I'm here. and validate those feelings. When we've had the chance to resettle, maybe it's you're driving in the car, you've just had some quiet music playing, maybe they've even got their backpack on their lap, they're giving that a big squeeze as you're driving home. And when they feel ready, they might be able to talk a little bit more about what's really upset them or frustrated them across the day. Knowing that in that very moment, in the heat of things, that's not necessarily the time to ask, can you tell me what's going on?
Which is hard because I think as any parent would want, you kind of want to have a bit of an idea of how their day has gone. So you can, 2 reasons. One, have that conversation, but also to unpack maybe why you might be feeling a particular way and how you as a parent can support that. And sometimes it is when that young person is happy to talk about it, they will start that.
And I think even, that will come. That will come when that person is ready to. I even think in a session this week, one of my young friends had a little wobbly moment, feeling quite frustrated about how things had played out in an activity that we were doing. And actually, I just, as best as I could, help to separate them out from that situation, help them to move to a quieter space. We, very fortunately what we have access to in the clinic, and we were able to have a big squish under some crash mats and just some quiet time, just reinforce that I was there. And then I just essentially held that space with them. And when they were ready, they were able to say, I'm feeling frustrated because this happened. And we talked it through and we stayed under the crash mat a little bit longer. And then I just said at the end, are you feeling ready to go? Or would you like a big hug before we finish? And they just came in and had the biggest bear hug because they were ready for that and regulated to do so. So I think just holding the space can have so much power, more than you realise. The
other thing that I do want to just finish up with on this one is that as a parent, sometimes you might interpret that child has the behaviours of what you're seeing has escalated or has kicked in the moment they see you. And so there's this inside your mind, you're going, is it because of me that these things are happening? And obviously it's not, but I understand why a parent might go, when that happens, it's because of me. Yeah, for sure. And that's a tricky place to be because you go, well, I'm trying to do everything right, but as soon as they see me, then these things happen when obviously, as you said, it's because you're that safe person and they are feeling comfortable enough. Never easy. Yeah. You've mentioned before, that's not that that's an easy thing to do, but it's really, in most cases, never about that caregiver themselves. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's also really easy to go into the teaching moment of stop, don't do that, we don't hit, things like that. Yeah. But actually, once again, I think that opportunity can come later when we're able to talk things through and say, hey, I could see that you're feeling really frustrated. Yeah. I wonder if this might help us next time, or I can have this ready for you so that you can help redirect them to something along those lines, just to be able to chat it through when they're ready to. Yeah, great. Okay, we might go on to the next question. Just a bit of feedback that we did receive, which is great. Again, I think, and even more pertinent, it is from an OT. So we got an OT called Kate who just wanted to provide some feedback about one of our recent episodes on handwriting and handwriting support. And I know in that episode we did talk about some of the foundational skill elements for handwriting. And I think you did mention about one of the assessments we used, the BERI, the Visual Motor Integration Assessment. However, one thing that I do want to say is that whilst we do focus on the foundations a lot, and it's like any higher order skill, whether it's handwriting, whether it's using cutlery, whether it's dressing, there are a whole bunch of sensory motor skills that are required to ensure those skills are effective. We do handwriting assessments. Yeah. We actually undertake those, knowing that is in its own right a skill that is, required for school or high school students. A number of times I've done a handwriting assessment to explore a person's confidence or a person's ability to be able to perform at the level of their peers for an examination condition or whatever it may be, to provide further evidence of this person needs accommodations or this is actually where their skills are at. Yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes, we might even do a handwriting observation or handwriting speed test. Yep. So that's kind of where we might start with an assessment, especially for any new person accessing the practice, so we can get a sample of what that looks like. And then we
observing that and going, oh, I can see that maybe the neatness of their work did deteriorate over that time, or it seemed more effortful for them, or their spatial layout was tricky, or actually they were super avoidant of that and that was a barrier to them engaging. And then we're looking to accompany that with the assessment results for whatever else that we do. So it's trying to have that broader understanding of, yes, this is the occupation, this is the task, but what are the elements at play underneath that might be making that challenging for them, with the aim of supporting that skill development so that they can undertake these tasks that they need to, which might include handwriting.
Yeah, of course. And I know as OTs, we do get a fair bit of, well, we get enough referrals, not I wouldn't say heaps, particularly in our field. We don't see them as many as maybe some other practices do. But for any young OTs out there who may be getting more referrals, and this came back from a question we had from an OT, a while ago, who did mention, I'm getting a lot of handwriting referrals, what do I do? I think, circling back to the response is, yes, handwriting assessments, what can they include? So you mentioned handwriting speed tests. There are other assessments. There's the DASH, but even if you go back to visual motor integration, there's the visual motor perception. And the visual motor, the accuracy of the motor, the motor one, which they're like a battery of assessment items that look purely at perceptions. Can this person identify shapes and sizes and perceive what's bigger, what's smaller?
Yeah, which helps us understand and support letter formation, differentiate between letters that look quite similar, B's and D's, that kind of thing.
Yep, and then motor accuracy, how controlled is their pencil on the page.
Yep.
And then the combination of that visual motor, how much control I have. Sorry, I'm drawing here. Oh, actually, no, we've got a camera. That's fine. It's not great on the podcast, but how much control they have when they're drawing. Plus, can I actually see with that perception what looks different in size and shapes, combined to this integration of the visual and the motor. That's that visual motor integration. Those are done in that theory. But we also have for ourselves, we use the EASY assessment. The EASY is the Evaluation in Air Sensory Integration, which is a really comprehensive sensory assessment. And one of the first items is the visual praxis designs.
Yeah.
And that one looks at visual motor integration. So you're copying shapes, you're copying items, and in that you're getting a sense of that person's skill in being able to see, plan, and execute what's on the page.
And even something like the bot too, those first components with motor precision and motor integration has those elements there. So you might be looking at that to go, well, how do they redraw different shapes? What's their capacity like to reproduce those items? And then making inferences about how that would impact with handwriting. And then you've also got elements that are looking at things like postural control and balance and how you coordinate both sides of the body. So then you're coupling that with, well, I could see that handwriting was really hard, but I can also see that these are areas that we can support with, and the flow-on effect that would have in something like handwriting. So yes, I might be practicing that handwriting task, but I'm also going to address these other elements that help put that skill all together. So
one thing that did come through from the comment as well is that there was the awareness of maybe SI as a more bottom-up approach. But I think when I read that, I was considering that initially. Then we came back from our ISIC conference and it reinforced to me that SI is I guess, misunderstood as a bottom-up approach. And I don't think that's any indication of people thinking that bottom-up approaches aren't effective or that SI isn't effective, but that air sensory integration actually is quite a complex. It's a very complex theory and practice that does take postgraduate education. Right? And so because it is quite complex, seeing it simply as a bottom-up approach is probably not doing it justice. It's not doing what it's set out to do.
Yeah.
And we had a talk from one of the doyens of sensory integration, Suzanne Smith-Rowley, who mentioned that the way forward with explaining SI is through this transactional approach.
This integrative model.
Correct. And so the transactional means that they're coming from different angles. It's not just bottom up. It's not just top down. It's coming from this. Like if you wanted to plot it on the graph, you can see things going all over the place.
Yeah.
It's not as simple as we work on the foundations. That means it builds the skills at the top.
Yeah.
Yes, that's one part, but there are times where we have more of a top-down approach. There are times where we have, we are having to support this person and give them the planning or the skills to then help their body understand what the sensory systems need to do in that activity. So that transactional approach was something that, I certainly took away.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, when we're talking about top down, bottom up, we're almost imagining these stages of development as like a pyramid. So what you've got at the bottom is how we take in different information through our sensory systems, how we organize that, the skills that layer and develop from there in terms of these sensory motor skills. So that is coordinating both sides of the body, those postural elements, balance, our motor planning. Then you start to bring in these visual and auditory elements that supports within things like handwriting, that visual motor integration, auditory language skills. And at the very top of this is the combination of all of these things coming together. And it is things like daily routines, behavior, attention, self-organization, and just everything we want and need to do in our day. So it's almost like this very top level is quite commonly what we observe. And the purpose of the assessments, like what we're saying, is to understand what's happening in these layers underneath that's making that harder. And we do, whilst we're bridging any gaps or opportunities that there might be within that profile from the bottom up, we're also exploring strategies at that top level so that young person can have better opportunities to do those things whilst we're supporting the skill development, because that can take time.
Absolutely.
And, a multidisciplinary approach at times too to support that. But you need those tools while you're building the skills. So it's a combination of that. And another thing that I love from Suzanne's talk that you just referenced, in addition to this transactional model, is that, yes, we have air sensory integration as an approach that we can use, but we're occupational therapists first. And this is an approach that we can utilize to help our young people towards the things that they're looking to achieve. But there's so many other things that we can bring into as part of that. And I think quite historically, as being a practice, a therapy approach that isn't focused so much on tabletop tasks, hearing this and knowing that fine motor handwriting is so often a goal, and we're incorporating things in sessions like, tongs, tweezers, anything where you're having to use that same fine motor control, similar to you would when you're using a pencil and in handwriting. But is there further opportunities for us to be exploring these written tasks as just an extra layer in with what we're doing? And we do, in terms of handwriting practice, it might be, hey, can you draw out this obstacle course and then we'll build it? Can you write down the rules of this game so that we can then share that with others? Let's make it really clear. Can we keep score of this on the whiteboard as we're doing an activity? Are we drawing in shaving cream with chalk? We're still applying these skills, but potentially in different ways, but all with the intention of helping them work towards that goal, particularly if handwriting is an area that's requiring support.
Yeah. Play is so important in that as well. So you mentioned about something like handwriting. I've always found, and maybe it's just my approach, I don't know, but I always found that for the young people that we work with, their desire to sit at the table and work on their handwriting skills is very low. And I've always felt as though incorporating clients' goals and needs and the parents' goals and needs and trying to find that balance is really important. And I do spend time doing activities that, whether it's drawing or doing pencil obstacle courses or things like that, are more fun ways of building those skills. Yeah. That works because it's ensuring that the therapy is still playful, regardless of what approach you take. And even for something like handwriting, it's always going back to what are the goals? What are you actually wanting to work on? Yeah. As any therapy, what is the frame of reference? And we use like a GAS scale or a goal attainment scale system, and that's something that we've worked on, or we've got this data-driven decision-making model, and that was another thing that came from the Congress, and you can talk more about that. But that's essentially, okay, we've got some goals here, but how do we get to those goals? It's from effective assessments. It's from data that we've got to say these are the areas that are challenging. And from there, if handwriting comes out as an area and the family want to work on it, fine. Yeah. Then at least you have that information, but it starts from developing the right goals and the right and I don't discount at all that some young people need explicit teaching, specific practice to then build those skills. But I guess we're looking for something that's
integrated as well, where there's multiple things and we're addressing those elements that are making that task hard for them too.
So some other things that you picked up from the Congress?
It was, I guess speaking about air sensor integration, we had some brilliant keynote speakers who really are the doyens, like you said. I've never heard the word doyen so much in my entire life as I have over this last week. And it might have been because you were emceeing the conference as well. But then you were explaining to the doyens what doyen means, and I got to hear that too.
I think because it sounds so much like doily, and so you've got doily and doyen, and they're very, very different things.
Yes. I think they'd interpreted that as like an age-related thing, but we're really just meaning these gurus in the field.
The best of the field, the most the most trusted sources on. Anyway, I won't get into the definition of doyen, but you can look it up in the dictionary.
Yeah, and I don't need to. I've heard you talk about it. But, hearing those keynote speakers and then hearing these incredible women speak as a panel at the end, and I felt like it was the Avengers forming on stage, where it's, we've got Shelley Lane, who's just so brilliant when it comes to anything neuroscience based, and Roseanne Schaaf, who's such a guru when it comes to the research and all these things that are driving the evidence base, and as a result the successful uptake of air sensor integration across many countries. Zoe Mayu, who's just, and when it comes to the assessment, and I think she was actually referred to as the everything person, so I think it extends
Jack of all trades,
trades, master of all of them too, and Suzanne Smith-Rowley, who we've referenced, who's very focused in the therapy and the practical applications of these theories. And they're just, it was just incredible to hear from them, to hear how all their research and hard work has pioneered this next stage for air sensor integration. I know for me, when I started at OTFC, having not perhaps learned about air sensor integration so much at a university level, but then hearing it and how it's utilised in practice, this was something for me that I was just like, I can make so much sense of this.
Yeah.
And it's been brilliant to be able to learn further around that from the conference and additional learnings here.
But I think that's the other thing, is that I know that air sensor integration isn't for everybody, but like any approach, I think it's also worthwhile to understand exactly what that looks like, what air sensor integration actually is. And why I say that is because in one of the talks by Roseanne Schaaf, she mentioned about, and some listeners might know, there was an article in the Journal of Australian Occupational Therapy Journal of OT in 2019, lady called, I think it was Karen Novak, or Novak was the author, who actually did a whole analysis of all the different types of therapeutic interventions. And this is in 2019, like we're talking 5 years ago.
Yeah.
In there, she'd actually listed sensor integration in a do not do category. So that's sitting here as a sensor integration therapist on a podcast, and I'm saying she had listed that as a do not do. The information that she was talking about were sensory-based strategies that aren't considered air sensor integration.
Yeah.
They're strategies, they're approaches that don't have the evidence base, that don't have the rigor, that don't have the information that some of the other therapeutic interventions have. And in the time from then till now, there has been a plethora of sensory integration research, probably one of the most researched fields in paediatrics, largely led by Dr. Schaaf and colleagues. But from there, we have seen that within Australia, sensory integration has gone from the do not do list to being considered an evidence-based practice, and has even, there's the autism CRC, which is, I guess our guiding body of approaches to work with autism, and there's enough evidence of air sensor integration to be considered within that list of therapy, within that list of recommendations.
I think there's a lot of opportunity as well in terms of the research that has been done, which is very focused on the assessments, how we measure goals, having this really clear intervention manual about how air sensory integration can be implemented in sessions to make sure that's meeting these fidelity measures. But then they're looking at the application of that in really specific outcomes, like in handwriting, in dressing, things like that. So I think even identifying where the research base can go from here. I think we walked away with about 20 different projects that we think we're going to be doing from here, but it's really exciting to hear what that's looking like and the rigor behind that.
And we're in which epic now? In the implementation epic, which was from another talk. There were different, stages of, I think it's epic, EPOCH. Is that how you pronounce it? Epic?
That's how it was pronounced.
That's how it was pronounced. But that's where we're at, implementing some of these changes. And I know we don't always talk about air-centric integration on our podcast, but I think now is probably the best time. We just come back from that Congress where it was all about air-centric integration.
Yeah.
And how it can be such a wide-reaching therapeutic approach, and one that doesn't get used, as you said, we're OTs first. So you can use air-centric integration with another frame of reference.
Yeah.
You can use it in a variety of different approaches to use it. For a trauma-informed lens, you can use air-centric integration. DIR floor time, which is just another approach. You can use air-centric integration at the same time as that. It's not exclusive. And I think that's where it becomes quite effective. And I'm going to stop talking because otherwise I'll get in my ASI high horse. But I think
we're there together.
Yeah, we're probably there together. But I think it's just a really good opportunity to use this as a way to educate listeners as well about air centrifugation is one approach.
Yeah.
But we're OTs and we have to use a variety of approaches.
Yeah. And I think I was chatting with someone actually at the Congress who had gone through the air sensory integration training to become accredited, but the practice that they worked in was actually more home and school-based. So it was actually taking some of those key concepts and applying it in that format in addition to the other elements that they use within their practice and clinic. So I thought that was really cool, probably cements what we were just saying then, that that's something that they now have in their toolbox to utilise as they need to. And interestingly, part of the panel discussions was about the implementation of an air sensory integration approach in schools. And there is going to be, from what we understand, a guideline that's going to come out around that and how we can get creative with how that's implemented using playground equipment, things that we can carry with us between spaces. Because a lot of OTs, when they're working with young people in schools, they'll have things they can pack up in the boot of their car and to take to different places in addition to what they might naturally be able to access in these environments. So how can we still make sure that we're meeting these fidelity measures? And I think it'll be really exciting to see what the guideline says, but I think even from our perspective, we were thinking that actually the opportunity is there and it's not so hard to extrapolate these things and apply it in that way.
And there was one more talk that I did want to mention. It was from our own Stacey and Michelle, who talked about practitioner sustainability, which was so different to some of the other talks and in a refreshing way, because you can spend all your time doing research and all your time building, this evidence base, but that also takes a lot of work and looking after yourself and understanding the rigors of working in a sensory integration therapy space is quite taxing and something that we are, acutely aware of as OTs working here, that we're trying to find ways to ensure that our staff.
I just saw so many people come up afterwards and talk about how impactful that was, what aspects of the conversation had really resonated with them, the things that people were reflecting and feeling, oh no, I do these aspects of self-care really well, but these things I've got to start doing that, otherwise I won't be able to support that sustainability. And then hearing, the keynote speakers reference their learnings from it as well. It was just so many wonderful takeaways. I think we're aiming to share a few of them on our socials. So keep an eye out on our Instagram page, because we'll be able to share some snippets of that. But they were incredible.
Yeah, I certainly enjoyed our time together and with the others who were there at the Congress. I know we spent a bit of time talking more about sensory integration and the Congress stuff, but
we were just so excited to share with everyone.
Well, I think it would be remiss of us not to share some of our learnings to our listeners. And that's all what this is about, is to pass on the learnings, to pass on the information we have to ensure that it's a community, because some of the learnings we got are relevant to all OTs. It's not just sensory integration.
Yeah, very true.
And the sustainability one, first and foremost, every single practitioner, whether you're an OT, whether you're an allied health professional or in any profession, sustainability is what keeps people going and keeps them
absolutely
motivated to continue to work. So,
and as OTs, what do we have at our disposal that can best support the awesome young people and families that we work with?
What do we have?
It's a long list. I thought we were wrapping up, Michael.
We'll wrap up there, but thank you again for those who've submitted questions. As always, submit them if you have some to the podcast at otfcgroup.au email. Otherwise, the OTFC group on Instagram, you can spam Eli with all the questions that you have, and he will filter them and pass them through to us.
Thanks so much, everyone.
One last shout out to Fletch. If you're
Good
listening,
night.
good night, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys.